button. Listen live, whatever you're up to, on BBC Sounds.
Great to have you back. It's 8:35. You're listening to BBC Radio London's Breakfast Show. I'm Vanessa Feltz. So nice to have your company today. Hope you have a nice and enjoyable weekend in store. Did you know that this week is the start of LGBT Plus History Month? It's organised by the charity Schools Out. And this year's theme is Politics in Art. This month also marks a year since the head teacher of St Dunstan's College, Nick Hewlett, came out to his students in an assembly. And we spoke to him then, and I'm delighted to say we're going to talk to him again right now. Hello, Nick. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Vanessa. How are you?
I'm very well, and I remember fondly and with great admiration, actually, that moment when you made that announcement to your pupils with such, I don't know, warmth and humour, and it was absolutely inspirational. When you look back on it now, what do you think?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled, really. At the time, I was wondering whether it was the right thing to do. And of course, over the course of the last year, it's just been resolutely the case that it's had a transformative impact, not just in our school, but on so many. And I've had communication from so many different schools and school leaders and from students, just very, very grateful for what seems to have been a catalyst amongst the education sector to realise that they need to do more to be as inclusive as they possibly can of all of their students and all of their staff. No matter their points of difference, and to celebrate those points of difference.
And so in what sort of form would you say that the transformative impact has manifested itself? Have there been specific pupils who, were struggling with the knowledge of their own sexuality or their own inclinations, personality and character, whatever it was they were struggling with, who have found that you kind of created an inviting climate or a welcoming atmosphere to discuss what they were worrying about?
I think that's all certainly true.
Yeah.
And if I look at my own school, I mean, we've always been very inclusive anyway, frankly, and very diverse. So I think although it will have had an impact here, and it has had an impact here, I think the biggest impact that I would cite would be the impact that it's had on other schools and on other school leaders. And I had a lot of teachers coming to me saying, look, I now feel as though I've got a voice to help my school take this matter really seriously and to embrace it so that it can improve the opportunities and acceptance for individual pupils in those schools. So I think really the biggest impact that it's had is probably amongst other schools and in helping to kind of modernise school cultures elsewhere in the way that we're very privileged to have here.
I'm wondering whether, because this is real life and real life isn't always kind of textbook or even storybook, is it? There have been people who criticised you, whether you came in for, some kind of criticism, and maybe people saying, you're a headmaster and you need to just be the head teacher and lead the school. They really don't want to hear about your sexual proclivities. It's not appropriate. Were there critics?
There were a very small handful of critics,
Yeah.
but a blissfully small handful. I mean, I just don't see why that criticism would be levied. I mean, it's about being honest with young people who have minds that are malleable and need to be opened to the diversity and richness of life, and to understand it and to be okay with it, not just okay with it, but to celebrate it. In diversity, there is strength, and in this country, a wonderfully diverse country, we have an opportunity to really lead the way when it comes to inclusion and equality. We look at what's going on in other parts of the world, and I think our role as a bastion of equality is more important than ever to showcase what we can do. And education is where it starts. And if you don't have role models in education who are really making a stand and saying, look, this is not just okay, but it's something to be celebrated, then how can we possibly fulfill that, what I would describe as actually a moral duty in the world today?
Tell us a little bit about LGBT Plus History Month. I mean, for some people, it will be the first time they've ever heard of it. I know it's extremely important, very significant, but why do you think it matters?
Well, it's enormously important because people are very quick to forget that it's not very long ago at all that we lived in education under the spectre of Section 28. Which was so enormously damaging for the education in this country.
And just to remind people what it was.
Yeah, of course. That was the legislation that banned the promotion of homosexuality in schools or in the school curriculum, which in effect meant it was impossible for it to be taught. And the idea of the nuclear heterosexual family was to be promoted at the expense of any other type of alternative family. That was enormously damaging in so many ways for young people like me, who I was growing up in the 1990s when it was very much in place. and for teachers who very much wanted to guide and help and support students who may have been struggling with their sexuality, who just could not do it. I mean, they would arguably have been breaking the law. Now, that's not long ago at all that legislation was in place. And so we really need to be mindful of that. And I think the reason that I think LGBT history is so important in schools is to remind people that we cannot be complacent over these rights. Mm-hmm. We just can't afford to do that. They can quickly be taken away. Just look at what's happened in Hungary over the course of the last year.
Quite.
It can very quickly be taken away. And so reminding ourselves all the time of the journey that we've been on as a community, the troubles that we've had to create the environments of equality that we now have and enjoy, we must not be complacent.
And the theme this year, politics in art. I think some people may be bewildered by that theme before we've even started, because you might think LGBT plus politics, yes, that's very important, something you could kind of understand, something well worth learning about. LGBT plus, the featuring in art and the world of art and creativity, absolutely yes. But the two together, oh my gosh, complicated before you've even started.
Yeah, it's really complex. I put that complexity back into the hand of my LGBT and pride societies with the students to try and unravel and unpack that. They've been doing some really interesting things, actually, talking with our race leads about LGBT role models in the Black community and the artistic Black community in particular. So they've managed to get Dean Atta. I don't know if you know of Dean Atta, who wrote Black Flamingo, which is one of the texts that we teach here.
Actually, I am familiar with it, although I'm not sure I've read the whole thing. I wonder whether part of it was in a magazine or something, and I've seen it. Just tell people a little bit about that if they haven't seen Black Flamingo already.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't taught it, so I don't know fully, but it's about it's an exploration of identity, really, both racial identity and sexual identity through the eyes of a young Black man. And it just, in all sorts of ways, really gets young people thinking and discussing issues that matter in contemporary society. And it felt really important for us that we introduced that to the children at a young stage, and in early adolescence, for them to really start getting under the skin of some of these issues. And we're delighted that Dean's going to come into the school and meet with our students.
Oh, that will be really exciting. Actually, I wouldn't mind you talking about it on the programme when that happens, if you wouldn't mind.
Love to, yeah,
and maybe with Dean. I wonder if Dean would talk to us with you at the same time. I mean, I know I'm trying to organise a future show live during a show, which is life imitating art, imitating life in the weirdest way. But I wonder whether that might be all right. That would be so great if you could sort that. I would massively appreciate it, Nick. Let me ask you, though, about something that we've already talked about on the programme today and is so distressing. And this is the report that's just out about children's mental health being so severely affected in lockdown and by lockdown, and children really in a state of high anxiety, acute kind of mental problems, and very little facility to help them deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. And it's true. Yeah. It's really, really distressing and really difficult. And I mean, obviously, I keep my ear to the ground across the sector, and there's not a head out there who's not saying the same thing. It's impossibly difficult. And we're just beginning to understand now the huge, immeasurable impact that this pandemic has had on young people, and that shutting youngsters away in their homes and in their bedrooms has had just the most enormously negative psychological impact on so many. And I remember we had this conversation on your program before, and whether we should have a more optimistic approach. And of course, I want to remain optimistic, but the reality of the situation is that these children have, as a consequence of those decisions over the last 2 years, developed, in many cases, very unhealthy habits around use of technology, around worth of self, around friendships and their relationships with others, their relationships with adults. And all of that now needs to be responded to, which we can do if it's properly resourced. But, the problem at the moment, we look at child adolescent mental health services, children with pretty significant needs and in need of intervention can be waiting up to 9 months for intervention with the authorities, which is, it's hopeless. So we have to. And so
when you say, don't please, I interrupted you. But when you say, what we need to do is X, but actually we can't because the facilities aren't there. So in practice, what is happening? I mean, if you can't get the help that's needed, the expertise that's urgently required, what do you do instead?
Well, you have to do what you can internally with the resource that you've got. I mean, we're fortunate that we're a well-resourced school so that we can bring in additional counsellors and psychotherapists and just do whatever we can to support the children. But other schools aren't in that situation, and that's terribly, terribly difficult. I mean, I think in the short term, the government needs to release money. I know they have done this, but they need to release money urgently to respond to the urgent need of these young people. I think longer term, frankly, Vanessa, this points to a much broader need for curriculum reform in this country that moves the emphasis away from an almost exclusively knowledge-rich curriculum into one that really works with young people around issues and skills and how they feel about themselves. You know, a proper education that really looks at how we develop their mental health, their well-being, their character, their happiness, frankly, rather than just knowledge assimilation.
And yet, so many people listening to this will think that you are right, of course. Who could possibly say that you're not? But that is the part that is meant to be furnished at home, so that, you know, what you can require from teachers, what you can expect from them, obviously some kind of support for children, some kind of pastoral care, but essentially they're imparting the technical details of Latin or biology or algebra or whatever it is, or rugby or singing or whatever. And it's the parents who are meant to be instilling character and, you know, a sense of belonging and a sense of self and a sense of self-esteem. And it's too much to expect that to be part of the curriculum, and maybe would take the curriculum in areas of kind of woolly, kind of nebulous kind of, you know, well-being. If you go into the sort of well-being and personal improvement sector of a bookshop, and some of them are absolutely chronic and some of them might be all right in certain paragraphs. You know what I mean? That it would take the whole education system in a direction which is kind of delightful but not appropriate.
I'm just not convinced by that argument. I mean, absolutely, of course, parents and carers have a role to play, but equally, so do schools. And I'm not talking about a complete wholesale reform of a knowledge-based curriculum, switching it over to skills. Of course, I'm not saying that. But I mean, here at St Dunstan's, we do an hour a week with all children in early adolescence, talking to them about conflict resolution, talking to them about mental health, talking to them about making healthy choices online. So a whole hour. I mean, it's not an enormous amount, but it's a significant amount of time, enough, I would say, to tackle some of these big issues. Of course, the other point is that how would parents know? Let's take the situation about e-safety and making appropriate choices online. I mean, the reality is that the children are going to be ahead of parents in this country when it comes to tech choices. They'll always be able to outsmart parents. So it's the teachers with the professional expertise in this area who have to step up and have to have conversations with children about making the right choices online. If they don't do it, who else is going to do it? I mean, the parents can try and have that conversation, but from a position of what level of expertise? And that's where I think we have to work together with parents, school and children. And in fact, we've just had a conference on this area with parents and children coming together and talking about appropriate choices online.
Mm-hmm. And just give us the essence of a little of that discussion, talking about appropriate choices online. So what was broached and what was said? What do you think was the sort of crux of that? Just so we get some idea of the sort of substantive content of these kinds of conversations, so that, you know, so they don't appear mushy and sentimental and so subjective that you couldn't imagine them being taught across all schools.
Well, let's look at the biggest risks at the moment, and a lot of this has been heightened because of the pandemic. The biggest risks are pornography addiction, gambling addiction, social media addiction, and all of that leading to the sort of self-esteem and mental health anxiety and issues that are being reported on today. What's the root cause of that? In my mind, a significant part of the causation behind the mental health challenges that we've got at the moment is the role of technology, and the technology that has been forced upon these children as effectively their psychological crutch throughout the course of the last 2 years. And we and the sector are seeing these issues manifest in the mental health of young people. So we've got to get to the cause of it. And if that's the cause of it, what do we do? Well, you can't ban technology from young people. We're far beyond that point, and nor would we want to. You've got to educate young people in how to make the right choices. And I absolutely think schools do have a role to play in doing that. I absolutely do.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. We always enormously appreciate it, and we would love to have you back, you know, whenever you have time. And also, I think we'll do a big, you know, education program, a big education show, and those ideas of yours, which obviously are incredibly far-reaching, I think would be very welcome, and we'd love to give it, you know, more of a platform so people can discuss. Thank you very much indeed. Very much love and great affection to you. That is Nick, and he is Nick Hewlett, the head teacher of St Dunstan's College. Thanks very much.
BBC Radio London.